Bienvenidos a Spanish Crash Course, where we're learning the entire Spanish language in nothing but 10 minutes. We have many subjects to cover, so let's begin. Vámonos! Primero, we're going to talk about numbers. I'm sure all of you are familiar with the first 10 numbers, so feel free to join me in counting. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. After the first 10, we have a few more numbers to memorize before they begin to take a regular pattern. 11 is once, 12 is doce, 13 is trece, 14 catorce, and 15 is quince.
Then, the numbers take a regular pattern, where we say a word for the tenth spot of the number, which we'll get to in a second, and then the one spot, which we just learned. The words for the tenth spot take a while to learn, so for time's sake, I've listed them here. Now that we know the rules, we can begin to say numbers. The rule for Spanish numbers is, again, the tenth spot, the word y, and the one spot. 16, for example, would be 16, with diez for the tenth spot and seis for the one spot. Similarly, 47 would be 47, with 40 as 40 and 7 as 7.
Every numero follows this pattern until you get to 100, which is 100. Now, we'll move on to our next exciting topic, los sustantivos, or nouns.
In Spanish, nouns have gender, a concept that no existe in English. Every noun in the Spanish language is either male or female, with the males usually ending in O and the females usually ending in A. Male nouns are preceded by the word el, and the ladies are preceded by la. Both el and la mean the. For example, let's say that I want to say the book. In Spanish, book is libro, so because it ends in an O, I know that it's masculine. Therefore, if I want to say the book, I would say el libro. Now let's assume that I want to refer to a chair. In Spanish, chair is silla, so because it ends in an A, I know that silla is feminine. Therefore, if I want to say the chair, I would say la silla. After our extensive 1-minute lesson on Spanish nouns, we know that all Spanish nouns are either boys or girls, masculine or feminine. Additionally, the masculine nouns generally end in O, while the feminine nouns generally end in A. Finally, masculine nouns are generally preceded by the word el, meaning the, and feminine nouns are generally preceded by the word la, also meaning the. Now that we understand Spanish nouns, we can move on to a closely related topic. Adjectives, los adjetivos.
The first major diferencia between English and Spanish adjectives is where the adjective goes in the sentence.
While adjectives in English come before the noun, like red dog, in Spanish they come after the noun, with perro being dog and rojo being red. A red dog is el perro rojo.
La segunda diferencia between Spanish and English adjectives is that all Spanish adjectives must agree in both number and gender with the noun they describe.
So what does this mean anyways? Let's say I wanted to talk about a white house. In Spanish, the word for house is casa, and the word for white is blanco. However, blanco is the masculine form of the adjective. We know this because it ends in an O. Casa ends in an A, meaning it's feminine, so if I want to talk about a white house, I need to use the feminine form of the adjective. Therefore, I will turn blanco to blanca, giving it an A at the end, and we'll say la casa blanca. What if there's more than one noun that I want to describe? Let's say I wanted to talk about some delicious hamburgers. In Spanish, the word for hamburger is hamburguesa, and the word for delicious is delicioso. Just like we did with White House, we have to make hamburguesa and delicioso agree in gender. Hamburguesa ends in an A, so we know that it's feminine. Delicioso ends in an O, so it's masculine. We need to make it feminine, so we'll give it an A for an ending. Now we have hamburguesa deliciosa. However, there's more than one hamburger that we're going to be talking about. We're talking about hamburguesas, with an S at the end. We also need to make the adjective agree with the plurality of the noun, so we're going to give deliciosa an S at the end, deliciosas. In doing so, we make the adjective agree with the number of the noun. Earlier, we made it agree in gender, so now our adjective is perfect. After all of this conversion, we finally have hamburguesas deliciosas.
When using Spanish adjectives, there are two things we must consider. Uno, gender, and dos, plurality. Now, before we move on to our next lesson, we're going to embrace a Mexican tradition, la siesta.
Sleep, baby, sleep. Outside there is a sheep. Its fleece so white and cuddly. Its milk so sweet and lovely. Sleep, baby, sleep.
back to class. Let's talk about subjects.
I wumbo, you wumbo, he, she, me, wumbo.
As demonstrated by Patrick, all sentences must have a subject, whether it's I, you, he, she, we, or they. Since every sentence has a subject, it is very important to memorize the Spanish words for these subjects. We'll begin with that now. It will take a while to memorize these words, but for right now we'll briefly cover them. Whenever you're referring to yourself, use the word yo, meaning I. If you're talking to a friend, use tu, meaning you. Remember, this is an informal word, so it should only be used with friends. Usted, just like tu, can also mean you, but it's used for formal settings, so if you were talking to your professor, for example. In this section, we also have él, meaning he, and ella, meaning she. Nosotros means we. Vosotros means you all in an informal way, but it's only used in Spain, so we shouldn't have to worry about that too much. Finally, ustedes means you all, and ellos means they. These words form the foundation of nearly every Spanish sentence, so it's very important to memorize them. Now, let's take a look at one of Spanish's most common verbs. The verb ser means to be, and is used to describe things. Earlier, we learned the 6 Spanish subjects, shown here to the left. Because there are 6 subjects, each verb in Spanish has 6 forms. The forms of most Spanish verbs follow a regular pattern, but ser is irregular, so its forms need to be memorized. We will briefly cover those forms now. If you're talking about yourself, use the word soy, meaning I am. For example, I could say soy amable, meaning I am nice. If you're talking to a friend, use eres, meaning you are. For example, if I was talking to a friend and I wanted to tell them that they are nice, I would say eres amable. If you want to say you in a formal setting, or are talking about a person, place, or thing, use es. Earlier, we were talking about a White House, and we called it La Casa Blanca. If I wanted to say the house is white, I would say La Casa es Blanca. If you want to say we are, use the word somos. For example, if I wanted to say we are smart, I would say somos inteligentes. Note that inteligentes has an s on the end, because I am referring to a plural group of people. Sois is the vosotros form of the verb, but again, it is only used in Spain, so we won't cover that at the moment. The final form of the verb ser is son. Earlier, we talked about delicious hamburgers, calling them las hamburguesas deliciosas. If I wanted to say the hamburgers are delicious, I would say las hamburguesas son deliciosas. And with this, we conclude today's learning portion of Spanish Crash Course con Señor Pepe. Let's move on to some review. Today, we learned about los números, los sustantivos, or nouns, los adjetivos, adjectives, los sujetos, subjects, and finally el verbo ser. I hope you were paying attention, because it's quiz time. Question number 1. Using the chart below if necessary, how do you say 72 in Spanish? If you said 72, you are correct. Question 2. In Spanish, the word for apple is manzana. Is manzana masculine or feminine? Because it ends in an A, manzana is feminine. The Spanish word for delicious is delicioso. Using the information from the last question, how do you say the delicious apple? The delicious apple in Spanish is la manzana deliciosa. What if we had more than one apple? How do you say the delicious apples? The delicious apples in Spanish is las manzanas deliciosas. Question 5. The Spanish word for athletic is atlético. How do you say I am athletic? Athletic is an adjective, so it has to agree with the noun it is describing. If you are a boy, you would say soy atlético. If you are a girl, you would say soy atlética. Last question. If you thought this quiz was easy, call it the easy quiz. If you thought it was hard, call it the difficult quiz. If you thought this quiz was easy, you would call it la prueba fácil. If you thought it was hard, you would call it la prueba difícil. And pencils down. That does it for quiz time. Right now, I am speaking in Spanish. This lesson has been so effective that you are directly taking these Spanish words as I say them and translating them into English without being conscious of the process. You are completely fluent. Congratulations!